with Jonathan Raven, who's attorney with the group called Citizens for More Michigan Jobs. They're the ones who want to put the idea on the ballot that we could have more casinos in the state of Michigan. And he talked about the Board of Canvassers. Now, unless you dive deep into, statewide politics, you wouldn't know what a Board of Canvassers is. And Kyle Melinn from MIRS News, who gives you the inside skinny and can explain things, is here with us in our AT&T studio at the Grand Traverse Pie Company. So let me get this straight. You could get the amount of signatures, and it's hundreds of thousands needed to get a ballot on and go through the courts because somebody challenged and all that, but the buck stops down the street at the Board of Canvassers. Who are they?
Well, the Board of Canvassers is a four-person body that is actually appointed by the governor, but for all intents and purposes, they're party hacks, and everybody knows it. I mean, the governor is given three names from each political party, and they got to pick which three do you want. And the Republicans used to, load the list with a bunch of folks, that are Republican loyalists, and the Democrats would do the same to Governor Snyder. The idea is that the framers had is that we should have a body that agrees agrees what the parameters are going to be for the proposals before they go on the ballot. Now, they're supposed to perform kind of a perfunctory task. Usually the Bureau of Elections comes up with a proposal, says, all right, this is what it is. You got to go ahead and approve it. But what has happened here in recent years, and particularly this year, lawyers come up and argue that, well, they didn't really follow this letter of the law, or they didn't follow that letter of the law, and I don't know if you should be approving this. And they get kind of caught up into this dilemma as what happened yesterday. So when there's some doubt, there's cases where they'll just say, you know what, we don't know. I'm not going to go ahead and approve this if I don't know. And you can settle it in the courts because ultimately these are decided either in the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court anyway. So
the Supreme Court trumps the Court of Appeal or the Board of Canvassers?
It does.
Because they sound like they're almost like judges.
It sounds like it, but they're not paid. It's a volunteer position. In fact, one of the four is at the Republican National Convention. He wasn't able to make it.
Yeah, Norm Schinkel.
That's right. But, really, it's the Court of Appeals. Back when we had the affirmative action ballot proposal, the Court of Appeals ordered something on. Supreme Court can trump the Court of Appeals if it wants to. It doesn't have to. So really, it's an administrative board. It's kind of frustrating for those involved, but really it's a kind of a step in the process when you have big interests who are willing to spend money to go to court anyway. Really, the canvassers end up being kind of just the step in the process, really.
So what will likely happen then to the casino idea, which has got the signatures, was actually struck down in court, and then that decision was reversed by the Supreme Court. Then it went to the Board of Canvassers, who said no. Now it's going back to the Supreme Court today.
All right.
And will it be bounced back for the last time then, or once it reaches the Supreme Court and they say it's okay, it's on?
As long as the lawyers can't find any other reason to challenge it. They had one reason struck down. The canvassers agreed with the second reason. As long as there isn't a third reason or a fourth reason, or if the Supreme Court is a little bit more firm, in that decision that they had on Friday, they said, as far as we can tell, it's clear, the question that you brought before us, we think it's okay. But it didn't say it must be on the ballot. And it can. It can say this has got to be on the ballot and this is it. And at that point, the canvasser game is done.
A lot of time, there's not a lot of time to actually sort of campaign for these or against these proposals if it's all tied up in court and in the Board of Canvassers. Or is this enough time for people to get a grasp on it? Some of them are complicated.
Some of them are complicated, but you realize that a lot of these ballot proposals are already buying airtime or have purchased airtime and will be putting out their 30-second snippets and what they mean anyway. So it becomes kind of an ad war game at that point anyway, and how much message do you really need? Do you want 8 casinos in the state or you don't? Do you think we should have more alternative energy or do you think we shouldn't? They can be broken down to pretty simple messages, and in the end of the game, whoever's got the most simple, convincing message is going to win anyway.
Which one of the ballot proposals do you think is least likely, if any, to make the ballot? Or can you even tell at this stage?
No, because a lot of the arguments on why they shouldn't be, I think the one with the bridge actually may have the biggest problem because there's a couple other complicating factors involved in that one. The language in it defines an international bridge as any bridge in the state that isn't built before January 1, 2012. It doesn't say international bridge in the language, so it can be construed as literally any bridge in the state. I mean, if you want to get textualist about it, and we have a textualist court. Now, is that a legal reason to keep it off, or is that an argument just to use during the campaign? You know, it's probably the latter. But if a judge or a court want to take it off, that's just as good of a reason as any.
So that is, I mean, since when do citizens in Michigan get to vote on roadworks?
Well, I don't think that's what they really meant. You know, obviously, they just meant the one international bridge.
This particular case.
But if you take a look at the definition, you just take a look at just that sentence. It says any road or bridge. There's really no question about that. You can say, well, they intended to, and then you read the next paragraph of the ballot proposal. It says any ambiguity must go before the voters. Well, that's ambiguous. It's still got to go in front of the voters, you see.
It's very technical, and it seems almost like legalese at this stage. And when you do go into to vote, let's say you hadn't looked at anything, and you read it when you walk in there, can you really grasp it in however many words it's allowed to be?
Oh, I think so. You know, I took a look at the language that the Board of Canvassers approved yesterday, and I think it's pretty simple. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, the Bureau of Elections has been doing this for many years. Chris Thompson over there does a great job. And I think, though, that they are very clear, and I think the voters will be able to decide. I think this really more speaks to the money involved in these ballot proposals. I mean, when the framers of the Constitution got together and decided, we'll let citizens amend the Constitution if they like, I don't know if they envisioned the process that we have today, where we have one big moneyed interest throwing millions of dollars into paid circulators to get signatures. And face it, if you've got millions of dollars, you can get the signatures you need to get about anything in. And I just think it's one corporate interest against another. Voters are kind of thrown in the middle.
If we subscribe to mirsnews.com, mirsnews.com, what do we find?
Well, we find at least 4 stories on this today. The Board of Canvassers meeting, about 10 or 11 on state politics, Pete Hoekstra, the convention, and a couple extra stories on the Jase Bolger and the Roy Schmidt scandal.
You're never going to get this anywhere else than MIRS News. mirsnews.com will give this to you in your email box and on the web every single day. We're nice to see you in person every once in a while.
It's my pleasure, Michael Patrick.
Kyle Melinn, we're back in the flash.